Ladies and gentlemen, every man thinks he understands women until he loses her trust, her respect, or her interest. And it doesn't happen because she changed. It happens because he never learned the truth about her weaknesses, not the ones you use to control her, but the ones you use to connect with her. If you don't know them, you will fail without even knowing why. But when you do know them, you'll never lead the same way again. You want to understand women better? Then listen carefully. Because if you get this wrong, you're going to keep running into the same walls over and over again. And it's not because women are impossible to figure out. It's because most men stop paying attention after the first 5 minutes. They think they already know it all. That's where they fail. If you want connection, trust, and influence, you've got to learn to see beyond the surface. Here's the truth. Women have weaknesses just like men. But here's the twist. Most of these aren't really flaws. They're openings. They're the places where connection happens if you know how to handle them with respect and confidence. You don't weaponize them, you don't exploit them, but you do understand them. Because when you understand, you can lead. And when you can lead, everything changes. The first weakness? Emotional overdrive. When she's in the middle of a storm, she's not thinking in bullet points and logic charts. She's feeling it, full blast. And here's where most men mess it up. They try to fix it right away. Don't jump in with a solution. Just stand steady, let her see you're not shaken, and give her space to let it out. That stability you show, that's power. The second, overthinking. She can take a simple text you sent and run a marathon with it in her head. Every pause, every word choice, she's reading it like it's a mystery novel. Your move, be clear, be direct. Don't play games. Your consistency kills the chaos. The third, and you've seen this, is the need for reassurance. Not because she's weak, but because she's wired for connection. She wants to know you're there. You don't need to write poetry every night, but let your actions confirm your words. Make it obvious you've got her back. Fourth, the power of influence from her circle. You might think your relationship is just between you and her, but her friends, her family, her coworkers, they have a voice in her head. Don't try to fight that. Instead, become the kind of man her circle can't badmouth. Show integrity so strong it's undeniable. Fifth is vulnerability to charm. Not fake charm, not pickup line nonsense. Real charm, warmth, charisma, confidence without arrogance. You don't get this by memorizing lines. You get it by knowing who you are and owning it fully. She'll pick up on that energy in seconds. Sixth, emotional memory. She might forgive, but she doesn't forget how you made her feel. That means every careless joke, every cold response, they get stored. You can't erase them, so control your delivery. Lead with respect even when you're frustrated. Seventh, attraction to certainty. She doesn't want a man who's half in, half out. If you hesitate on the big decisions, she feels it. If you're clear about what you want and you own your direction, you become magnetic. Eighth, her tendency to test boundaries, not to destroy them, but to confirm them. She might push just to see if you're still the man you claimed to be at the start. Don't get defensive. Hold your ground without anger. That's when she knows you're solid. Ninth, the craving for emotional variety. If every interaction feels the same, she'll lose interest. That doesn't mean you have to be a stand-up comedian, but bring contrast. Be serious when it's needed, playful when it's right, surprising when it counts. And 10th, the biggest one most men ignore. She wants to feel chosen every day. Not just at the start when you're chasing her, not just when things are easy, but even when life is a grind. That doesn't require grand gestures every week. It's in the eye contact you hold, the way you listen, the way you treat her like she's the only woman in the room. Understand something. These weaknesses aren't there for you to beat or win against. They're signals. They tell you where trust is built, where attraction is fed, where love grows. And if you approach them like a checklist to manipulate, you'll fail. If you approach them like a blueprint to lead with strength and empathy, you win without forcing it. Men lose when they get lazy, when they start assuming instead of learning, when they stop paying attention. And women feel that instantly. You want influence, you want her to follow your lead, then earn it, not once, but daily. And when she's spinning in her emotions, Don't match her chaos with chaos. Be the calm in the storm. When she's overthinking, don't feed her confusion with mixed signals. Be consistent. When she's looking for reassurance, don't roll your eyes. Prove it with action. When her friends weigh in, don't get defensive. Be the man they respect, even when they disagree. Charm her with authenticity, not performance. Protect her emotional memory by speaking with intention. Make decisions with clarity so she never questions where you stand. Hold your boundaries like a leader, not a dictator. Keep things alive with contrast and variety. And most importantly, never let a single day go by where she doesn't feel chosen. This isn't about walking on eggshells. It's about stepping up. It's about knowing that influence doesn't come from control. It comes from presence. The kind of presence that makes her feel safe enough to be at her most vulnerable, yet excited enough to stay drawn to you. You don't have to be perfect. You will make mistakes. You'll say the wrong thing, miss the cue, read the moment wrong. But here's what matters. You learn. You adapt. You don't keep repeating the same patterns that make her lose faith in you, because once her faith is gone, so is the relationship. You want to stand out from every other man she's met? Learn these 10 points until they're second nature, not as tactics, but as part of who you are. You walk into a room with clarity, confidence, and self-control, and she'll feel it before you even open your mouth. That's influence. That's leadership. And here's the kicker. When you understand her weaknesses, you also start to understand her strengths. You'll see the resilience behind her emotions, the loyalty behind her need for reassurance, the passion behind her variety, the fierce protection behind her circle. And when you can respect both, you're not just some guy she dates. You're the man she chooses to follow. Now you can dismiss all this and keep doing what you've been doing. Keep arguing when she's emotional. Keep giving half answers when she needs clarity. Keep waiting for her to just get over it instead of showing her you care. But don't be surprised when she pulls back. Don't be shocked when she stops trusting you. Because influence isn't given, it's earned, and it's kept through action. You want her loyalty, her attraction, her respect, then show up every day like you mean it. Learn her patterns, not so you can control her, but so you can lead her better. Learn where she's strong, where she's open, where she's sensitive, and then be the man who knows how to handle all of it, without fear, without games, without losing himself in the process. Because here's the reality most men don't want to face. Leadership in a relationship isn't about you being the loudest voice or the most dominant presence or the one who always gets his way. Leadership is about stability. It's about being the man who can take heat without crumbling, who can handle tension without making it worse, who can be a source of certainty in a world full of noise. When you understand the places where she's most vulnerable, you also understand the places where you need to show up the strongest. And that's not always in the way you think. Sometimes the strongest move is silence. Sometimes it's walking away from an argument instead of throwing fuel on it. Sometimes it's telling her the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. The men who fail are the ones who try to win every moment. They don't realize that when you're focused on winning, you've already lost. Why? Because you're making it a competition instead of a connection. The goal is not to beat her in a debate. The goal is to make her feel understood, even when you disagree. That means when she's emotional, you don't try to match her volume. You lower yours. When she's overthinking, you don't throw more uncertainty into the mix. You clarify. When she needs reassurance, you don't shame her for it. You give it without making her feel needy. And every time you do that, you reinforce something powerful. You're safe to trust. But here's the part that separates the men she respects from the ones she tolerates. You don't bend so far that you lose yourself. You can be understanding without being a pushover. You can be kind without being walked on. You can listen without abandoning your own truth. In fact, if you want real respect, you have to do both. Care deeply and stand firm. That's why boundaries matter so much here. And boundaries aren't walls, they're clarity. They're your way of saying, this is who I am, this is what I allow, and this is what I don't. When you hold them with calm confidence, she feels both your strength and your self-respect. That combination is rare and it's magnetic. Think about the testing I mentioned earlier, that those little moments where she pushes to see if you'll hold your ground. That's not an attack, it's a measurement. She's checking if the man she met is still the man standing in front of her now. If you crumble, you teach her that your words are just decoration. If you hold firm without being cruel, you show her your words have weight. And weight is everything. Your words have to mean something. If you say you'll call, call. If you say you'll be somewhere, be there. If you promise to take care of something, take care of it without her having to remind you 3 times. Every broken word is like a crack in the foundation. Too many cracks, and the whole thing collapses. Consistency is what makes a man trustworthy, and trust is what turns attraction into commitment. Without it, all the charm and confidence in the world won't last. Now let's talk about the craving for emotional variety. This one trips men up because they think variety means constant excitement, fancy trips, expensive gifts, dramatic gestures. That's not it. Variety is about energy. It's the ability to be playful on a Tuesday morning, to laugh in the middle of a serious conversation, to be affectionate in ways that aren't routine. It's creating moments where she can feel something different than the grind of everyday life. The danger is falling into autopilot. You wake up, go to work, come home, eat, watch TV, go to bed, day after day. Predictable isn't bad, it's safe. But safe without spark becomes dull, and dull kills connection faster than conflict. So you have to break patterns sometimes, change the pace, shift the energy, remind her that there's still life and movement in the space between you. And let's not ignore the last one we talked about, making her feel chosen. This one is the anchor for everything else. You can't fake it. If she feels like she's just part of your routine, like you stop seeing her the way you did in the beginning, she will feel the distance no matter how much you tell her otherwise. Being chosen isn't about words, it's about attention. It's in the way you put down your phone when she walks in. It's in the way you listen without distraction. It's in the way you look at her when she's talking like she's the only one in the room. That kind of focus is rare and it's unforgettable. Most men make the mistake of thinking they can skip this once the relationship feels stable. That's when they start coasting, when they stop doing the little things, and then they wonder why she feels distant, why she seems less invested. You can't stop choosing her and expect her to keep feeling chosen. Now, let's zoom out for a second. These so-called weaknesses are really just human needs showing up in specific ways. And if you're smart enough to recognize them, you can meet those needs without losing yourself. That's how influence works. It's not about force, it's about alignment. It's about knowing what matters to her and knowing how to lead in a way that honors it. But this takes discipline. You don't just wake up one day with this level of awareness. You train it, you watch, you listen, you pay attention to patterns, you notice how she responds when you're steady and how she reacts when you're careless. You take those notes seriously. And here's where it gets real. If you can't master this with one woman, you're not going to magically master it with another. Switching partners doesn't fix bad habits. It just gives you a new person to disappoint. The real work is becoming the kind of man who naturally leads with confidence, clarity, and care. That means handling your own emotions first. If you can't stay calm when she's upset, you can't lead her out of that storm. If you can't be consistent in your words and actions, you can't expect her to trust you. If you can't set and hold boundaries, you can't expect her to respect you. You set the tone, always. Whether you realize it or not, you are teaching her how to respond to you by how you show up. If you show up distracted, careless, impatient, that becomes the standard. If you show up present, decisive, and grounded, that becomes the standard. And once you raise that standard, you have to live it every sigh.
Ingleday, because leadership isn't something you do once to impress her. It's who you are when no one's watching. That's what makes all of this work. Not the tricks, not the lines, not the image you project on social media. It's the daily, quiet consistency of a man who knows who he is, what he stands for, and how he treats the woman in his life. And if you do this long enough, something powerful happens. She stops testing whether she can trust you. She knows. She stops questioning whether you'll show up. She feels it. She stops overthinking whether you still choose her. She experiences it every day. That's when the dynamic shifts. That's when you're no longer trying to handle her weaknesses. You're building a life where those weaknesses don't cause chaos because they're met with strength, understanding, and direction. And here's the thing. Once you become the man she trusts to lead, your job isn't done. That's the point where most men let their guard down. They think they've made it, that the connection will run on autopilot. But connection is like strength. If you stop training it, you lose it. It doesn't fade overnight. It slips away quietly, day by day, until one morning you wake up and realize you're strangers living in the same house. That's why you can't just focus on the moments when things are tense. You have to be intentional even when everything feels good, especially when everything feels good, because comfort is the silent killer of attraction. It makes you slow down, stop paying attention, stop putting in effort. You don't notice it at first, but she does. And it's not about living in a state of paranoia, constantly worried you'll lose her. It's about choosing to keep showing up with the same presence and purpose that won her trust in the first place. When you lead with consistency in the calm seasons, you won't have to work twice as hard in the stormy ones. You have to remember that leadership in a relationship is more about the atmosphere you create than the individual things you do. If the atmosphere around you is tense, impatient, dismissive, that's the emotional climate she's living in. If it's steady, intentional, and alive, that's the climate she thrives in. And you set that climate every single day by how you carry yourself. That means checking yourself before you react. Because the truth is, you can't control her emotions, but you can absolutely control your own. And when you control yours, you influence hers. That's not manipulation, that's leadership. When she's anxious and you're calm, she starts to feel grounded. When she's frustrated and you stay composed, she starts to feel safe. When she's unsure and you're decisive, she starts to feel secure. Most men want to be trusted without proving they can be trusted under pressure. That's why they fail when it matters most. Anybody can be charming and confident when things are going well. The real test is whether you can keep your composure when you're tired, irritated, or under stress. And here's the uncomfortable truth. She's not just paying attention to what you say, she's watching what you do when it's hard, when you're disappointed, when plans change, when life throws something unexpected at you. Those moments tell her more about you than any speech you could give. If you fold, lash out, or start blaming, she'll see you as unstable. But if you adapt, problem solve, and keep your cool, she'll see you as a rock she can rely on. And that changes everything. You can't underestimate the power of being unshakable. It doesn't mean you're emotionless. It means your emotions don't own you. It means you can acknowledge how you feel without letting it dictate your actions. That's a rare skill, and it's magnetic. But here's the catch. You can't fake it. You can't just pretend to be calm on the outside while you're falling apart inside. That mask will slip eventually. You have to build the internal discipline that makes your external presence authentic. That comes from doing the work on yourself, handling your own triggers, facing your own insecurities, and developing your own purpose outside of the relationship. If your only source of identity and validation is her approval, you'll be too reactive, too desperate, too unstable. You have to be grounded in who you are, with or without her. That's what makes your presence strong enough to lead without force. And when you lead that way, she doesn't just follow, she relaxes. She lets go of the need to control every detail because she knows you're paying attention. She doesn't have to question your words because your actions already answer them. She doesn't have to test your boundaries because she knows you'll hold them. This is where most men underestimate their influence. They think leadership is about big gestures, taking control in dramatic moments, making the big calls. But influence happens in the micro moments. It's in the way you handle interruptions, the way you respond when she's irritated, the way you listen when she's talking about something that matters to her, even if it doesn't matter to you. And speaking of listening, don't confuse hearing words with actually listening.
Listening means you're not planning your response while she's still talking. You're not looking for an opening to correct her. You're paying attention to the emotion underneath the words. Because when you respond to that emotion instead of just the facts, you show her that you actually get it. That's what builds influence, and not just being right, but being understood. Not just fixing the problem, but connecting to the person who's experiencing it. But let's be clear. Influence without boundaries turns into weakness. If you only focus on understanding without standing firm, you'll be pulled into her emotional current until you lose yourself. The balance is in understanding her reality while staying grounded in your own. You have to be able to say, I hear you, I understand you, and I still need to hold this line. That's not selfish, that's healthy. It shows her that your leadership isn't conditional, that you won't abandon your principles just to avoid discomfort. And when you live that way, she'll respect you even when she disagrees with you. Because respect doesn't come from always saying yes. It comes from having the strength to say no when it matters, and the wisdom to explain why without turning it into a power struggle. Now, all of this takes time. You don't build this level of presence and influence in a week. It's a daily process, and you will mess it up. You will lose your temper sometimes. You will miss cues. You will say the wrong thing. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you have another opportunity to get better. The men who grow are the ones who own their mistakes quickly, not with excuses, not with blame shifting, but with accountability. I handled that badly. Here's how I'm going to do it differently next time. That single move can repair more trust than a dozen apologies with no change. Because here's the truth. She's not looking for perfect. She's looking for consistent growth. She wants to know that you're not stuck in the same patterns, that you're actually evolving, and that evolution benefits you as much as it benefits her. Every time you lead with calm instead of chaos, you strengthen your discipline. Every time you hold a boundary with kindness, you reinforce your self-respect. Every time you choose presence over distraction, you sharpen your focus. And those skills don't just make you a better man in a relationship. They make you a better man everywhere. And once you start seeing it that way, this isn't just about her anymore. It's about you becoming the kind of man who doesn't need to control to lead, who doesn't need to demand respect to receive it, who doesn't need constant reassurance to feel secure. That's when leadership becomes as effortless, not because it's easy, but because it's who you are. You don't have to think about how to handle her emotions because you've already mastered handling your own. You don't have to remember to be consistent because it's your natural state. You don't have to wonder if you're making her feel chosen because you've built a life where she never doubts it. And when you reach that point, the dynamic isn't a battle, it's a rhythm. You lead, she responds, and the connection deepens without constant friction. You're not reacting to problems all the time because you've built an atmosphere where problems have less room to grow. That's the level most men never get to, not because it's impossible, but because it requires more discipline than they're willing to give. But if you're willing to give it, if you're willing to keep showing up, keep adjusting, keep holding yourself to a higher standard, you'll see how different everything feels. Because in the end, the real win isn't just that she follows your lead. The real win is that you've become a man worth following. And once you understand what it feels like to be a man worth following, you realize this isn't about ego. It's not about the applause. It's not about proving people wrong. And it's not about winning points in some invisible scoreboard. It's about living in such a way that the people closest to you feel more secure, more valued, and more inspired simply because you're there. That's real influence, the kind that doesn't fade when the room goes quiet. The thing is, the more consistent you become, the more you'll start noticing the subtle shifts. Conversations that used to turn into arguments now stay calm. Tension that used to hang in the air dissolves faster. Situations that used to drain you become opportunities to lead with composure. And that's when you see the truth. Leadership isn't just for the big moments. It's for the everyday ones, because the everyday moments are where trust is either built or broken. It's not the anniversaries or the vacations or the big surprises that determine whether a connection stays strong. It's the day-to-day respect, the way you speak, the way you listen, the way you follow through. People don't drift apart overnight. They drift apart because the small moments that should have brought them closer were neglected.
That's why you can't afford to coast. Coasting is silent decay. It's the mindset that says, I've done enough, without realizing that leadership is a living thing. It either grows or it withers. And if you think showing up strong for a few weeks is enough to carry you for years, you're already on the decline. You've got to treat this like an ongoing discipline. Just like you wouldn't expect to stay physically fit without regular training, you can't expect to maintain emotional leadership without regular effort. That means you keep sharpening your awareness. You keep studying the patterns, not to control them, but to understand them. You keep adjusting your approach so you're not stuck using yesterday's solutions for today's challenges. And here's where a lot of men stumble. They expect gratitude for doing the bare minimum. They want praise for not blowing up during an argument, for paying attention once in a while, for keeping their word only when it's convenient. That's not leadership, that's maintenance. You don't get celebrated for doing the job you signed up for, yet you get respected for doing it with excellence day after day, even when no one's watching. Excellence isn't about being flawless, it's about holding yourself to a higher standard than comfort demands. Comfort will tell you that's good enough. Excellence will ask, can I do better? Comfort says, she'll get over it. Excellence says, I'll make sure she doesn't have to. Comfort looks for shortcuts. Excellence plays the long game. And the long game is everything here, because every small moment compounds. Every choice you make either builds the connection or chips away at it. Every time you choose patience over frustration, presence over distraction, clarity over confusion, you're making deposits into an account that will sustain you when the storms hit. Because storms will hit, they always do. It could be personal struggles, outside pressures, financial stress, health issues, whatever form it takes, there will be seasons where the weight is heavy. And in those seasons, you'll see why all the work you've been doing matters. When the pressure's on, your habits take over. If you've been practicing steadiness, you'll stay steady. If you've been practicing avoidance, you'll disappear. That's why leadership has to be who you are, not something you put on when it's convenient. If it's just a role you play, it will collapse under pressure. If it's your identity, it will hold when everything else shakes. And the more you live it, the more you'll see how it changes not just your relationship, but every part of your life. People at work will start noticing your composure under stress. Friends will look to you for advice. Strangers will pick up on your presence. Because leadership is a transferable skill, you can't confine it to one area. If you truly embody it, it shows everywhere. But let's be clear, this isn't about perfection, and it's not about becoming some hyper-serious, no-fun version of yourself. Leadership also means knowing when to relax, when to bring humor, when to create lightness. Because if all you ever bring is intensity, you'll exhaust the people around you. Balance is everything. Seriousness when it's needed, playfulness when it's welcome, and discernment to know the difference. Discernment is a skill most men never practice. They operate in extremes, too rigid or too lenient, too distant or too cling, too passive or too aggressive. But leadership lives in the middle ground. It's knowing when to listen without speaking and when to speak without hesitation. It's knowing when to let something slide and when to stand your ground. It's knowing when to comfort and when to challenge. You won't always get it right. You'll misread situations. You'll go too far one way or the other. But if you're paying attention, you'll learn. And that's the thing. You have to care enough to learn. Leadership dies when you stop caring. Caring doesn't mean being soft. It means being invested. It means showing that the outcome matters to you enough to put in the effort. It means taking responsibility for your role in every dynamic, even when it would be easier to point fingers. Responsibility is the backbone of leadership. Without it, everything else crumbles. If you can't own your actions, your words, and the energy you bring into a room, you can't lead. Because people won't follow someone who hides from their own mess. And when you take responsibility consistently, something powerful happens. Trust becomes the default. People stop doubting your intentions because you've proven that even when you fall short, you'll own it and correct it. That's a rare quality, and it makes you stand out instantly. It also makes conflict easier to navigate, because conflict isn't the enemy, avoidance is. Trying to sidestep every disagreement doesn't keep the peace. It just delays the explosion.
Leadership means facing conflict directly, but with control. It means addressing the issue without attacking the person. It means solving problems without creating new wounds. When you can do that, you don't just protect the connection, you strengthen it. Because every resolved conflict is proof that you can handle pressure together without falling apart. And that proof builds resilience, which is worth more than any momentary comfort. Resilience isn't built in easy times. It's built when things don't go your way and you choose discipline over impulse. It's built when you keep your word even when it costs you something. It's built when you show up even when you'd rather check out. And over time, that resilience becomes part of the foundation. It creates an unspoken confidence, the kind that says, no matter what happens, we've got this. That's not wishful thinking. That's earned assurance. And that's why this whole thing matters so much, because leadership in this context isn't just about guiding someone else. It's about transforming yourself into a man who brings stability, strength, and clarity wherever he goes. It's about being the kind of person whose presence makes others breathe easier, whose words carry weight, whose actions set the tone. That's the standard you should be aiming for. Not just to impress, not just to get results, but to live in such a way that your influence outlasts the moment